بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. The whole idea of this whole series or lectures we were doing is really about communicating better with people. We talked about things that deal with persuasion, that deals with understanding personalities and people, and changing people's behavior, changing their minds, and all that requires understanding people better. And the good news is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave all people the ability to read facial expressions, voice inflections, body language, and to intuit emotions. The problem is that most people have it in the off position. But it's possible just by being more aware that you bring it up a notch and you can quickly start to understand what people are really saying to you, how they're really feeling. And let me give you this example. So if you ever watch any production in another language, like I used to give the example of Telemundo, I don't know, does that even exist anymore? Yeah, it still exists. So if you're watching Telemundo, it's in Spanish, you don't understand what's going on. Because you lost the language, what do? You heighten all your other readings and you start to watch the scene very carefully. And even though you don't speak a word of Spanish, besides gracias, you start to understand that Alberto is in trouble because the way where Maria is speaking to him, and his body language tells you that he messed up big time, and she's letting him have it, and he's in trouble. If somebody walks into the room and starts to defend Alberto, and she's yelling at the other, you will figure out that he came in to intercede for Alberto. You can figure that out because now that you don't have the language, you're bringing everything up a notch. So the good news is that if we just start to become a bit more aware, we will start to be able to understand people better and read people better. But I always say the first step to understanding people is to understand yourself. That's the first step. Because, I don't know how to emphasize this. When you understand yourself, you can understand people. You can understand why you behave a certain way. You can understand why you don't click with someone. And understanding people's cultures, it goes sometimes beyond what you see. I'll give you an example. What in America, what do we think of Canadians? Very friendly, very polite, right? And that's all true. They're polite people and everything, but they're nowhere near as friendly as Americans are. They're nowhere near as friendly as Americans. So one of the interesting things when I lived in Calgary, Canada, when you go into Walmart, in the old days in America, what do they have? They have the Walmart greeters. Their job is to greet you, right? But in Canada, I noticed that the greeters don't say anything. They just stand there. The reason is that when they first had Walmart open up in Canada, they had the greeters and they were getting in people's faces, good afternoon, good morning, how are you doing? Welcome to Walmart. And then they got the feedback from customers, and the customers didn't like the greeters. They're like, I just want to go in and get, toast. I want someone in my face yelling things at me and everything. So they canceled that. So they just stand. And in the old days, you remember, you would walk in with a return and they'd put a sticker on you, your item and so on. So Canada looks just like America, right? It looks just like America. The streets look the same. Everything looks the same. And in the old days, when I used to travel a lot, sometimes I would forget that I'm in Canada. But I would always remember when they dropped me off at the hotel at night after the lecture, and I walk in, and I would always say, oh yes, I'm in Canada. You know why? Because the person in the front desk doesn't greet you. They just look at you and go back to what they were doing. I used to be angry in the beginning. If someone would walk into the elevator, I'm coming down from the 10th floor, it stops at the 6th floor, someone just walks in, just looks at me, turns around. Now in America, that would mean I have a problem with you, right? So I used to think, these Canadians got a problem? But it wasn't that. They're not like how we are, you know. Also when I was in Hong Kong, if you know how you hold a door for the person behind you. When you hold the door, the person behind you holds the door. They don't just walk through it. In Hong Kong, if you hold the door open, 6 people just rush through it. 1, 2, 3. It's like open door, great opportunity, and they just rush through it. And you're like, what is this? I'm not your doorman. Get your own door. And you might misunderstand people there. But part of it was during the bird flu outbreak that they had, the avian flu, if you remember, they had this outbreak, and so people became afraid to touch anything. They were afraid to touch anything. So if one guy touched the door and opened it, I'm going through that door. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people just walk through as you're holding it. Like, what's going on here? There's some other interesting things. For example, in Hong Kong, I had a friend of mine who used to go there a lot. He said, I would stop someone and I would ask them for directions to a place, or I would name the place, and the person would just look at me and just walk away. And at first he was like, that's insanely rude. I just asked you a question. They just walked away. They waited for him to finish the question. And then he understood the culture. So if someone is does not speak English fluently, they're too shy to stutter and make grammatical mistakes in front of you. So they would rather not speak to you than speak in severely broken English and embarrass themselves. So they'll walk away. So sometimes there are things beyond what you just see on the outside, that if you give people a chance and if you listen a little bit, you'll understand more, and it's not just a rude action as it would appear to be from the outside. But we're saying the way to understand people, first you have to understand yourself. How many people know if they're an introvert or an extrovert in here? Because if it's everybody, we'll just skip it. All right. Who believes they're an introvert? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Who believes they're an extrovert? Introvert? Okay, good. Extrovert? 1? Huh? Highly extroverted? Okay, good. Good for you. Highly extroverted. Good job. And all right. Now, so it used to be just introvert, extrovert, but then they came up with, because some people find themselves to be smack dab in the middle. Like, I'm a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So that's what they call it now. Does anyone know? Yes, very good. It's ambiverts. So someone's an ambivert. And you'll have kind of fall right between the two. Okay, so for those who don't know, these are just some basic descriptions of the introvert and the extrovert, and no one is better than the other. They're just different ways. And many times people don't understand. They think the introvert is shy, and the extrovert is just a loud person. Of course, it has nothing to do with that. But it's more like where you draw your energy from. So for example, for introverts, they draw their energy, or they recharge by being alone. And extroverts recharge by being around people. So, personally for me, this is one of the most telltale things. Like when you went to a wedding and you met this person and that person, and you're having conversations and met people from I don't know where, and you took selfies and exchanged phone numbers and everything. If you're extroverted, you might come back from an event like that and say, "Oh, it was such a fun event. We spoke to so many people," and you're energized. If you're an introvert, you come back drained. Yeah? Drained. Like events like that drain the life out of me, you know? When I used to travel in the old days, my wife would say, "Why don't you call me?" I was like, "I'm in class." Like, "No, after class is over, why don't you pick up the phone and when you get to the hotel and call me?" And I'll tell her, "I can't. I'm drained. From 10 a.m. we're talking, answering questions, taking selfies. Khalas, I'm drained. I don't want to hear the sound of a human again. I'm done." And so introverts like me, they recharge by being alone and not by being around people. That drains me. That doesn't mean you hate the people, and don't misunderstand that. It doesn't mean any of that, you know. That's one of the strong ones there. But there are other things, like for example, introverts, they're internally focused thoughts and ideas, whereas extroverts are externally focused, people, activities. That doesn't mean if you're an extrovert, you have to fall in these categories like that. Just be fluid there. In socializing, introverts prefer small groups and they prefer one-on-one conversation, whereas an extrovert, because someone might say, I'm an extrovert and I prefer one-on-one. That's fine, we're not saying that. But generally, how do they tend to fall? They enjoy large gatherings, they enjoy meeting new people. And the introvert can enjoy meeting new people, but it's not where they get their energy from. Communication, they think before speaking, they're generally reserved. Extrovert speaks freely, often thinks while talking. Introverts they work best alone or in a quiet environment. Extroverts work best in teams or collaborative spaces and stuff like that, Introverts are reflective and they need time to process. And extroverts are quick and they rely on decisions and interaction. Now, again, just anything I describe, don't think it means you're the opposite. So if I say introverts are reflective, that means extroverts just blurt out whatever. No, it doesn't mean that. But this is where this comes in to play, or where it's important. So you're an introvert and your wife is an extrovert. So when there's conflict, introverts deal with conflict in a very different way. If there's conflict, introverts first, they want to internalize and figure out how they feel about what happened. Then they want to organize their thoughts before we have the sit down about what happened. Like, if I want to talk to someone, I actually come with bullet points. I'll physically have them on paper, and I'll say, I wrote this down so I don't forget, and I'll just start going through my list, right? I don't just walk into a... Whereas the extrovert doesn't necessarily need that, like to write it down, process their thoughts, internalize how they feel about what happened. So now how could that be a problem between couples? So the husband is introverted and the wife is extroverted. Some kind of conflict or issue arose, and then the wife says, let's talk about this. And he says, not now. Not because he doesn't care about the relationship. He needs to take his time. He needs to, first of all, internalize and process how he thinks and feels about it, and then what he thinks should be the way to act moving forward, and all that other stuff. He needs time. But she's ready to talk about it. So what happens? You're not committed to this relationship. You don't want to deal with the situation. You're avoiding talking. You see where it becomes important. So, now, if you don't know that you're an introvert, for example, then how are you going to understand, and that your significant other, let's say, is one or the other? How is that? You can see how that can complicate trying to communicate well and understand one another. So that's what I said. One of the best ways to start understanding people is to first understand yourself. I took a course many years ago. It was on negotiating. And negotiating has a lot in it. It has psychology in it. It has like sales tactics. It has persuasion in it. It was a very, very beneficial class. Then the instructor said, I will give you the closest thing to... actually, there are more things that I skipped on the introvert, extrovert. A few more descriptions. But khalas, enough. He said, I'm going to give you the closest thing to a magic wand that I can give you. And if there was ever such a thing as a magic wand you can use, I'll give you the closest thing to a magic wand. And he talked about something known as the 3 personality types. Now, there are other categorizations by psychologists, and I don't believe these are like formal. We have Sister Sarah Radwan with us, and I don't think these are formal categories of personalities. They're just, I guess, they're just compartments where you can easily place the person you're talking to. So there's one that's the 7 personality types. There's the 4 personality types. And I personally prefer the 3 personality types because it's easy. Like if I have to find out which of the 7 you are, like is he 4 or is he 5 or is he 6, it's too much. But 3 is super easy. So again, this isn't like pure psychology here, but it does help you to quickly figure out the person that you're dealing with. I don't know if I spoke about how good salespeople, they figure out your personality type and they sell you the car based on that. Did I talk about that before? So I was saying that I used to have this weird hobby. I used to just go test drive cars at the dealership. That was just my hobby, right? And then the salesperson tries to sell me the car. And sometimes they think I'm an extrovert. So, true story. The guy was telling me, when you buy this car, everyone's going to want to talk to you. Girls are going to want to talk to you. I was like, I do not want this car. Because he thinks I'm an extrovert. So if you're an extrovert, they tell you how people will feel when they see you in this car. If the guy figures out you're introverted, they'll tell you how you will feel when you own this car. Extrovert, they'll tell you when you buy this car and you park it outside your driveway tonight, your neighbors are going to go crazy. That's what you could tell an extrovert. You don't tell an introvert that. Oh, people are going to want to talk to you. I'm like, then I don't want this car. Show me one where nobody will notice me. Give me that one. You know? So, in da'wah, in negotiating, it all comes in handy. And the 3 personality types, like I said, it's not like a clinical categorization, but it does help you in these scenarios. And I'll give you an example of how it worked in da'wah. So this one is easy. You've got commanders, you've got thinkers, you've got visualizers. All right? And commanders, they are... as the name kind of suggests, they're assertive, they're decisive, they're action-oriented. And they have a strong desire to take charge and to lead. They're very goal-driven, they're very focused, and they focus on results rather than the process. They want the results, all right? And they're good at making quick decisions, they're natural leaders, and they thrive in competitive or challenging environments. And their communication style is direct and to the point. A lot of times physically, they're also large, strong handshake, firm handshake. But that's not how we identify them, right? You're not going to go and shake hands with people and check their shoulder width and all that stuff. So how do you identify them when you're having a discussion across the table from someone? It's the words they use. They'll use words like take charge, get it done, win, goal, bottom line, lead, achieve, dominate, deliver, do it now, push forward, fast, top priority, results, action plan, deadline. You get the idea? Now, so if I'm selling a product to a commander, then this is now we're talking about good level sales. If I'm selling a product to a commander, then I should appeal to that side. So I'll tell him things like, we've been dominating the market for the last 5 years. We've been in business since 1980, I don't know what. And I'm giving him things that are appealing to the commander. All right? So these are commanders. Now, thinkers. The thinker is like an analyst, a planner. They're logical, systematic, detail-oriented. They focus on facts, data, careful planning. They prefer structured environments and predictability. And their strength as they're excellent at problem solving and analytical skills. They're good at risk assessment, planning ahead, and they're thorough and cautious, and they like to minimize mistakes. All right? So, communication style. They like precise, fast, and fact-based and formal speech. Yeah, are you seeing yourself? Yeah? And they prefer well-documented and logical discussions. All right? The words they use, details, plans, analysis, step-by-step, organize, data, evaluate, proof, logic, precision, method, and they use words like, they use why a lot, because they like to understand how things work, right? Or why this is happening. They use why a lot, and let's consider options. We need to verify this. What's the evidence? And for me, one of the big ones, it's not a big one. It's just, it resonated with me. I think. So, our third category, the visualizer. And I'm skipping ahead to the word they use is I feel. So when I was reading this, I discovered I could not think of one time in my life when I said I feel. I feel we should go here first. I feel this is a good idea. I feel we should go over there first and then go to the other. I've never in my life said I feel. Ever, ever, ever. Okay? Now, it's not better than the other. It doesn't matter. It's just, so I always say I think. I've never in my life said I feel. Ever, ever. To the point that now, sometimes I say I feel on purpose. Just, whatever. So what? What's going to happen? Yeah. Sometimes I just say I feel on purpose, Yeah, those are the thinkers. Then we have, they call them the visualizers. Some category or lists call them the creator or whatever, or creators and visionaries, But basically, there are more visualizers than commanders and thinkers combined on the planet, right? And that's part of the reason behind why, because most people are visual. And that's part of the reason behind why in classrooms they have whiteboards, blackboards, PowerPoint presentations, because they're visual. And sometimes, and I'm going to go through the list, but sometimes there's like some telltale signs. I remember one time I sat down with someone who was going to explain something to me. So he just took a blank sheet of paper, put it on the desk like this. So he wrote, okay, so we're here in America. He writes USA. And we're trying to go to China. He puts China. And I don't need to know that. I don't need to see this on paper. But he's a visualizer. Anytime someone is talking to you and they start drawing, not anytime, but you know what I mean, right? They start scribbling on a piece of paper, they're a visualizer. Now, here's the thing. Most people are visualizers. Now, suppose you're not. Suppose you're a thinker or a commander. Everybody benefits from visually seeing what they're learning about. If you remember the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ used he drew a line in the sand and he said, هَذَا صِرَاطُ اللَّهِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. This is Allah's straight path. He drew a line in the sand. He used like visuals here. And then he drew short curved lines coming out of it. And then the hadith to the end of the hadith. The point is that most people benefit from seeing things visually. So after reading this, we used to have this da'wah exercise where we would sit across the table from the non-Muslim and we'd go through steps and stuff. So we would write it down. And sometimes not even that exercise, we're just explaining things about the nature of Allah Azza wa Jalla. I'll just scribble things out. Okay? So there's one creator, write one. Eternal, write it down. And it helps people understand better. Now, if you think I'm just exaggerating, you feel free to think that, but you have to do something to see if I'm exaggerating or not. Start from now on, when you explain things, write them out. And kind of brief illustrations. And you'll see the difference. You'll see the difference in how people comprehend what you're saying, or how more they're convinced or persuaded by what you're saying. So, the visualizer, they're imaginative, they're innovative, they see the big picture. They love brainstorming. They love thinking outside the box. They're great at inspiring others with new ideas. They're adaptable and creative problem solvers. And they thrive in dynamic, fast-changing environments. All right? And then the words they use, where are the words? Here we go. The words they typically use: imagine, dream, vision, envision, future, inspire, opportunity, what if, let's explore, innovate, possibility, thinking outside the box, creative, transform, revolutionary, and they say, I feel. Now, you can be a commander and say, I feel, doesn't matter, okay? But that's their word. They say, I feel. So, if, let's say, there's a restaurant for sale, all right? The thinker comes in, and he looks at the paperwork, the place is not making money. It's losing money. That's it. I'm out. You understand? This is it. The numbers don't lie. The place is losing money. It's not making money. I'm not interested. The visualizer may also not be interested. Or they might say things like, I can see that it's not making money, but I feel this could be it. This could be my big break. Or we could make it work. Stuff like that. And you recognize the differences, and it's mostly through the words that they use. All right. What on earth does this have to do with da'wah? I have a saying in the da'wah class. We always say, everything is da'wah when you're in da'wah mode. When you're thinking of da'wah, you see da'wah opportunities everywhere. And you see da'wah arguments in everything, and I mean everything. I don't have time, but in the class, I would give examples of things that have nothing to do with da'wah, but would link them to da'wah. So, true story. This was, it's kind of and it's a little awkward for me to tell this story, but basically, I was invited to some masjid in California, and they asked me to give a lecture that they heard before. So they heard the lecture before, but they thought it would be good for the youth, so they asked me to give that lecture. So I'm giving the exact same lecture. In the middle of the talk, I get this note, and I opened it, and it was an insanely rude note telling me to have better manners. Ironic? Yeah, like a rude note telling you to be well-mannered. Like, it was insanely rude. So I read it, and like, what is this guy's problem? I just continued with the lecture. So after the lecture, this guy came to me. He said, by the way, I'm the guy who sent you that note. And I said, what was the problem? He said, well, you were using words like, so the lecture, al-Muhim, I don't want to say the words, but they weren't bad words or anything, but just, there's some kids here. So I was talking about the euphemisms people use for zina, right? So I'm talking to youth. Aslan inta, you uncle, why were you in this youth lecture aslan? That's the problem. So I started to, so I was using the words, nothing profane or anything, but it's just the slang terms for that, And he was saying you shouldn't have used these words. And I'm not going to tell you what 18th century word he suggested. I don't want to say it. But it was like, are you kidding me? Rappers don't say that. Nobody's going to know this word. What are you talking about? Anyways, so now I'm trying to argue thinker with him. And I want to give him 1 + 1 = 2. So I'm trying to give him arguments to show him that you're alone in this. Other people don't agree with you. And it's not working. He is red. His face is red. And he's physically, both feet off the ground, jumping in the air while he's talking to me. Like this. Yani, they're a little smaller. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Like, he's jumping up and talking, and his face is red. And I'm like, the logic is not getting through to this person. So I'm trying to tell him, by the way, I'm trying to isolate him and say, you're the only one thinking that way. So number one, the organizers of this masjid heard this lecture before. This was at Texas Dawah conference. This is before I moved to Houston. It was one of the old Texas Dawahs. It was either the second or third one, and I was invited to speak, and I gave that lecture. So the brothers from California were at the lecture. They liked it enough to want to repeat. So what I'm trying to tell them indirectly is, they didn't see anything wrong with it. They asked for the lecture as is, and they didn't ask for changes. You're alone in this. Then I told him, and this is the embarrassing part, but basically, a few days after when I arrived back in Virginia, Sheikh Walid Basyuni called me. He said, I just wanted to congratulate you. He said, we had people at the conference vote for the best lecture of the conference, and that lecture, Forbidden Love, was voted number 1. So of course my immediate reaction was, take that, Yasir Qadi. But I'm kidding. He knows about that joke, by the way. So I'm telling him now that there were many people at a conference, and they also found nothing wrong with it. You're alone in this. I keep telling him I'm giving him statistics, numbers, and this guy is. So then I told myself, stop. Think. Something is wrong here. And these arguments are not getting through to him. And then I realized, come on, man. You're giving him thinker arguments. He doesn't care about that. He's a feeler. What's the proof? His face is red and he's jumping off the ground. When was the last time you saw uncles jumping up and down off the ground? So he is emotional. So you got to connect with him on that level. And this is a true story. I'm not changing anything. And you won't believe how it fixed the situation. I just shared a story with him of how I was once in the audience, and the speaker was inappropriate, and that guy was insanely inappropriate, all right? So I didn't get into the details. I just told him, I know how he feels, because one time I was in a lecture. The speaker was insanely inappropriate, and I felt so angry that I didn't even want to talk to him because I didn't know what I was going to say. And so basically I connected with him like, I know how you feel right now. I did not retract any statements. I did not promise to change the language, and I did not apologize. And guess what happened? The color left his face. He started jumping up. He stopped jumping up and down, and he's hugging me and thanking me. Like, did he even notice that I didn't say sorry or didn't retract anything? He didn't notice. But what happened? He was a visualizer, and I was giving him thinker arguments. I was giving him statistics and numbers and voting and stuff that shows you're wrong, my friend, and you need to reevaluate your position. But that wasn't how you connect with, or connect with that person. It wasn't. And the minute I just shared how I felt, like how he felt now, boom, he was so happy, and it was the end of the story. And then years later, I was actually just 3 years ago, I went back to that masjid. So this was like 20 some years ago, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy." By the way, he does that with every speaker. Like always, in every community has that guy, right? Except our community. No, this guy, any lecture, he just goes off. Any lecture, you know. All right. So, 9:14, which means like exactly 30 minutes. طيب. Let me just pick some of my favorite techniques from here. And then I want to talk about something else real quickly. Okay. So, maybe I'll just talk about 3 of these techniques here, especially when it comes to youth. A lot of times some parents are old school and they think, my dad didn't have voting in his house. He didn't get everyone's opinion. He told the whole house what was going to happen. And the whole house said, "Yes, Father." And now I got to get votes and stuff. So they say, as a parent, be receptive to bargaining so acceptable compromises can be found, And there are ways to do that. So why is that important? The first one is, it's called the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice. So your child is refusing to go to bed and they want to eat this jar of cookies. All right? So you give them this choice. And the choice is, do you pick one of the two? Do you want to have one cookie and go to bed, or no cookies and go straight to bed? Which one do you think they'll choose? One cookie and go to bed. So you won, because instead of the jar of cookies, you got them to accept one, because you give them this illusion that you're choosing between the two. None of them are the one where you wanted, where you eat the whole jar. You just get one cookie and you go straight to bed. Or you get no cookie, you go straight to bed right now. That's the illusion of choice. Women know that very, very well, right? Because they'll, especially, with the husband, you get him to think it's his idea. And you know what they say, the man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck that moves that head. So that's one. Amir, are you taking notes? Because your wife is coming soon. Anyways. So that's one. Why is it important then? Why are we bargaining? Because when there's a saying that says, if you force me upon your point of view, then be sure that I'm still upon mine. Yeah. So that's why it's worth it when you as parents convince their children as to why they shouldn't do something, or explain the wisdom behind it. And it's so much more effective than just telling them about the boogeyman and the imaginary this and that, and scaring them with things like the police. Like, if they're lost, this is what they want. They need a police officer. But you scare them. It's so bad. Look, I don't know if people do this anymore, but this is like 80s, children not sleeping. Sleep, or I'm going to call the police. They'll come take you to jail. So kids are like afraid of the police. So they get lost in the park. Like, who's more scary, the kidnapper or the police? Forget about both of them. I'm not going to either one. And I remember when I had a younger brother, and well, I still have him, but when we were young, he was a little kid, and we used to always not, he would take him up to cops, shake hands and stuff like that. And then one day he got lost in the park. He went straight to the squad car, gave the phone number, the address of the house and everything, and he was found. But if he was scared of the cops, he'd look, hide in the bushes, there's a cop car over there, right? Anyways, so we were saying that if you just force them upon your opinion, then they're still upon their opinion. They're still upon their opinion. So that's why there's bargaining, there's convincing, but I don't mean open the door to insane bargaining, or what do you want for breakfast? What do we have? We have this and this and no, here's breakfast. Yalla. Bon appetit. Like the mother will ask the child, what do you want for breakfast? And she goes through the list of everything in the fridge. Then he goes, cereal. Then she goes, okay, what kind of cereal? We have Wheaties, Cheerios, Raisin Bran, cornflakes, mash'at. Then they, another half an hour. Don't. Anyways, the other one is that you can show affection even when you're enforcing discipline, so that they feel that they're being loved even when they're being reprimanded. So that's why psychologists say, don't criticize the person, criticize the behavior. Don't criticize the child, criticize the behavior. You're a bad boy for doing that. No, that was a bad thing you did. You're criticizing the behavior. Sister Sarah, you agree? You should have been here. You should be here doing this. So what's interesting, I had this student, or this young man actually, and his mother brought him to me, and it was a combination of drugs and stealing cars and all kinds of things like that. And one of the things that kept reinforcing to him that he is useless and a nobody was his father. So his father would always tell him how useless he was and what a nobody he was, and he would always praise his friends' sons. Look at so-and-so's son. Look at his grades. Look at how he does this. Look how he's good at that. And he's just destroying him like that. So if you are made to believe something about yourself, then, there's a psychologist say the easiest way to control a people is to control how they see themselves, right? So this is how he started to see himself. So he felt like he was a failure and he was useless. Why would someone who feels like a failure and is convinced he's a failure and useless sit down and study hard? And he's not going to do that. So the first thing we did was, I went to their home and even spoke about with the father on how to speak to his son and the kind of language to use with his son. And then the other thing is, because he wasn't one of my students, so I told the mother to put him in my class and all that stuff. And then, alhamdulillah, within a matter of weeks, and I emphasize in this story that it was by the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal. Because I only had him for 1 hour. There's no way I have you for 1 hour and you spend 70 hours with your friends and I can have some kind of influence. Had it not been for the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, in a couple of weeks this guy turned around, he's getting A's, he's not hanging out with these bad friends. And then I think many years later, I went back to Virginia and his mother came up to me and said, I'm so-and-so's mom, and he's married now, alhamdulillah. But the point is that his father was the problem, if I could say. His father was the problem because he was reprimanding him, but also showing him that you're not loved and you're worthless. Instead of criticizing his behavior, he criticized him. The other thing I wanted to say about lack of acceptance or lack of respect from others, especially those who are important to you. If a stranger disrespects you in the street, it might affect you a little bit, it may not affect you at all. Like, this guy doesn't know me, I'll never see them again. But if you have a family member or a loved one or a sibling who is showing you that they don't accept you or respect you, that will make you question your self-worth. This is one of the reasons psychologists explain why siblings get so mad at each other. I used to live in this city, and there were these 3 brothers. Individually or with the community, they were of the 3 nicest brothers in the community. And then one day I saw them speaking to each other. It's like a completely different human being. They're insanely mean with each other. They fight so much. So, why? Because the explanation is that you get angrier at siblings and people that mean a lot to you when they criticize you or when you disagree with them, because you need their acceptance and you need their respect. It means a lot to you. And without it, you might question your self-worth. And that's why you get angrier at a sibling than you get at a community member. A community member would do something super rude to you. You're very tolerant with that. Your sibling just makes the slightest mistake and just erupt on them. So, because if your brother doesn't feel, and I mean your sibling, your brother or your sister, feels that you don't accept them, then everything you say and do is interpreted through that lens, all right, of not accepting them. All right. Here's another quick one. I want to stop because I want to talk about something else. This should be like known. Never punish a child by telling them go read a book, or worse, go read the Quran. What happens? Go to your room and read the Quran. This is your punishment. What happens? They associate the Quran with the punishment, right? And this happens in some countries where the Quran is played at funerals. And some places, that's some people, the only time they get to hear the Quran is at the funeral. So one of my friends said, I was driving my car and I had a friend with me and I played some Quran. And the guy says, oh, no, could you turn it off? It reminds me of funerals and family members dying and everything. That's the only time he's exposed to the Quran. So imagine your punishment is to go read the Quran. Right? Face the corner and read the Quran. Then they'll associate it with that. And that's why they say, for example, if you, let's say you're homeschooling or what have you, or you're doing just Quran in the evenings with your family by yourself, they said you sandwich the Quran between two fun activities, they will associate it with the two fun activities. And of course, this is different when they know they're coming for a class and that's it. Khalas. But it could be anything else. You sandwich it with something that is fun and they'll associate it with those things as opposed to associating it with a punishment. The last one I want to say is don't yell all the time. Yell sometimes, but not all the time. What do I mean by that? So, I have this relative, and anything she says to her children, anything, she says it in the voice and loudness that says, I am super upset, I have lost my temper, and I've, khalas, reached my end point. Even dinner. She'll just come in the room and just yell at them, the dinner's ready. And then she'll say, brush your teeth and this and go to bed. They didn't do anything, they're just sitting in the room. So her default is she's yelling all the time. And I'm not exaggerating. So now, when she's really angry, because I was witnessing this one time, she was now angry and she was telling them, quickly, move. And they're just like this, slow-mo. Why? Because what they understand is that's how mom sounds all the time. When she's happy, she sounds like that. When she's calm, she sounds like that. And when she's angry, I can't tell the difference. So, and I used to make this mistake when I used to first teach kids. Like, everything would be like yelling urgent. And then that became my default. They became used to just, this is how I speak. So I noticed that when I would tell them to move or rush or everyone out or do this, nobody would do, just taking their time, because that's how you sound all the time. So if my baseline is here, how do I yell then? Like I have to lose my mind and go absolutely crazy to go above my crazy baseline? So I'll end with this story. This happened many, many years ago. And I was on a flight to London Heathrow. And it was a long flight. No, it was not a long flight. It was a long walk. When the plane landed, you have to travel again and get on camel until you make it to passport control. You know Heathrow, huge airport. So there was a Muslim lady on the plane, And she was like a few seats down from me. It was a very empty flight. And she had a little boy called Yasin. So, so when we were walking, I saw her, and she's got a bunch of bags, and she's got a small child, and she had Yasin. Yasin is like a 3-year-old boy or something like that. And I said, let me help you. She's got a lot of things. So I got some of her luggage, and now we're walking all the way to passport control. It took forever. And she would get nervous if Yasin was a little bit too further out. So she wanted him to be a little closer. So we're walking and walking. Yasin gets a little further. She goes, Yasin. And then 20 seconds later, Yasin. And then, Yasin. And then again, Yasin. And after a while, Yasin. 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 After like 5 minutes, I wanted to strangle this lady. Khalas already. And she just didn't stop until, Yasin. Yasin. And actually, on the plane, planes are loud, but I would hear her, Yasin. 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 Do you think every time she said Yasin, the boy slowed down? I think he doesn't even know his name is Yasin. He probably thinks it's a sound his mother involuntarily makes every 20 seconds. So, there's got to be a difference between your baseline and the whatever else the other thing is. So, anyways, I want to stop there, inshallah. There are a few other simple techniques for the youth and stuff. But I want to stop there because there had been in the last 2 weeks, or the last week even, a lot of deaths, right? A lot of deaths. And people think of, these celebrities, when they die, the whole world gets to hear about it. Even though, they were, I guess, Ozzy Osbourne, what was that all about, And then there was a guy from the Cosby Show. He also drowned a few days ago. And then Hulk Hogan died. But there was someone far more important than them, who obviously didn't get anywhere near the publicity, who died on July 19th. And this is one of our teachers. This was the Sheikh Jaffer Idris, or Jaffer Sheikh Idris, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was born in 1931 in Port Sudan, and he was an exceptional person, all right? First of all, he got his PhD in philosophy from a joint from University of Khartoum and the University of London in 1970. And he personally told me the story. So Sheikh Jaffer Idris, rahimahullah, he was an exceptional man. And he was exceptional since his youth. And he personally told me the story. He said, when you're getting your PhD, essentially you're writing a book, right? He said, I was writing a book, and it was the concept of causality in Islam. It's philosophy, his degrees in philosophy. So he said, I wrote a 60-page introduction to the book, and I turned it into the professor. 60-page introduction to the book. He said the professor was so impressed from the 60-page introduction that he gave me the PhD right then and there. He was blown away. He gave me the PhD. He said I was young. I said, no way, I don't accept, and wanted to work for it and everything. He said, I regretted so much. I suffered so much writing that book. I wish I took the PhD from the beginning. But from the introduction. And I'm not going to give a detail like he was professor at this, at that, but he was exceptional. When he was a young man, one time he was telling us how one time he got hit in class, where the teacher hit him in class. So we were excited, great, he's human, he messed up, he did something dumb, So I was excited to know. I said, what was it about? He said, the teacher was attacking Islam, and I defended Islam. Man. But even when you got in trouble, it was for defending the religion, huh? So let me put it this way. So we were studying with the Sheikh in Virginia, rahimahullah, and in the beginning, we didn't understand, because the Sheikh is very humble. He dresses very humbly. He doesn't wear like robes and turbans and stuff like that. It's very humble. He dresses simple and he speaks in humble words. He doesn't try to, even though his writings are superb in English and his grammar and his vocabulary is superb, but he doesn't try to show off with big fancy words and things like that. So a lot of times people, they misunderstand and they see that you're humble and they think, oh, maybe it's just like an average person who doesn't know too much or anything. One of our friends, he said, I went to Hajj. He was telling me the story. He said, I went to Hajj with Sheikh Jaffer, Allah yarhamu, and when we settled in Mina, he said, I went out looking for those top famous shuyukh in the Arabic language that we've been hearing their cassettes. This is old cassettes for years and everything. He said, I left Sheikh Jaffer in his tent and I went to look for these famous shuyukh. And he says, then when the shuyukh would find out that Sheikh Jaffer Idris is in my tent, he said, they would stop what they were doing and they would come to his tent and kiss his forehead and greet him. So this is a brother from Virginia who thought like, just a nice guy with us and everything. He said, I was blown away. Like these big shuyukh would stop what they're doing and they would go to, just to kiss his head. And I'll tell you why scholars thought so highly of him. But I'm telling you, like even, there's some things that I've seen with my own eyes. Like one time, Sudais, Abdurrahman Sudais visited us. And it was just a few of us with him in the room. And one of the people working with us was the middle son of Sheikh Jaffer, and he said, my name is such and such, Jaffer Sheikh Idris. And I just saw Sudais' face just light up, oh, how is your father and everything. I'll tell you what. So the first thing is that he was very humble, and even in the old days, like people, they used to travel a lot to the UK. One time someone asked Sheikh Jaffer, he said, where have you been in the world? He said, it's easier if you ask me, where have you not been in the world? So we're talking like early da'wah and stuff. And back then organizations didn't have a lot of money and there was, so they would give you the worst flight and then you would sleep in someone's floor. Like they used to go to England and they would sleep in someone's house and that person doesn't have heat and they would sleep on the floor and like they worked for it. Now, I know you want to make the comparison and say, oh, look at today's diva speakers who have conditions and my latte has to have 4 pumps of vanilla and all that. But also there's no need for them to sleep on the floor if hotels are cheap now. You understand? There's a balance. It's not like khalas. Sheikh Jaffer slept on the floor, you sleep on the floor. But it just shows you that how much they work for the deen and how humble. So he's humble in the way he speaks and dresses and everything. I was saying earlier, Sheikh Jamaluddin Zarabozo, he said the first time I saw him, when I came and saw him for the first time, he was playing volleyball with the youth. He says, I said to myself, I want to be that kind of sheikh, So what was so special? First of all, the scholars say he was like a rare blend and one of the true traditional Islamic scholars who blended Western philosophical training with traditional Islamic scholarship. A lot of times, especially in the area of philosophy, wallahi. So, especially in the area of philosophy, you'll find someone trying to delve into both and he'll just slip out of one or the other. But they would say like he was the last living scholar who was a true philosopher upon Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. One of the descriptions. And he used to always contemplate the Quran. And contemplating the Quran, it's not a joke. There's a famous story where the students came to Sheikh bin Baz rahimahullah. They said, what do you advise us to do? He said, memorize the book of Allah. They said, after we memorize the book of Allah, he said, memorize the 6 books of hadith. They said, after memorizing the 6 books of hadith, he said, contemplate the Quran. They said, after we contemplate the Quran, and the Sheikh just smiled. You understand? You're never ever done contemplating the Quran. The gems and wisdoms still keep coming until the day of judgment. You're never done. Oh, I contemplated it, I'm done, I'll move on to the next thing. You're never done. That's why the Sheikh smiled. Sheikh Jaffer Idris used to always contemplate the Quran. Alright? One of the days when I started to value the Sheikh, my first lecture I attended from Sheikh Jaffer rahimahullah, he was he was explaining certain things. Basically, a very famous article of his. For those who want to read it, it is brilliant. It's called Quranic Illumination on the Phenomenon of Sexual Deviance. Just read it. Yes, read it. It's brilliant. So then, I was just thinking, okay, this old man is just giving us stuff that you can get from Ibn Qayyim and Ibn Hajar and collect it. Then I found out, so from someone, he was saying the thing I love about Sheikh Jaffer's class is that he will give you things you cannot find in books. And that's why the scholars used to respect him so much. Like he'll give you a contemplation or a commentary on something you've known your whole life, but you never saw that, which one Sheikh put it so nicely, he called it the blind spots. He said, Sheikh Jaffer will show you the blind spot. What about the blind spot? Like it's actually there, the car is there, but you just can't see it, it's in your blind spot. Wallahi, there's time I thought of giving you some of his contemplations on some of the verses of the Quran. You're like, this is unbelievable. I've seen and I've known this verse my whole life, but I never noticed that aspect of it. It was a blind spot. He was good at that because he always contemplated the Quran. One time we were at his house and we were standing up about to pray. And then one of his sons was upstairs. So he tells his other son, okay, go call him. So he's going to call him and he's just going to stand at the foot of the stairs and call him. 20 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. And I saw the Sheikh grab the Mus'haf, open it. Like your eyes hitting the Mus'haf for long periods of time. Anytime you get a chance, your eyes fall on the Mus'haf. Sheikh would always contemplate the Book of Allah. And that's why he always came up with these brilliant, brilliant things that you cannot get in books. Go to Sheikh Jaffer, jafferidris.com, and you'll see the quality of his writings and sometimes the complexity of his work. I really do need to tell this one last story because we got like 3 minutes or so. One of his expertise, by the way, field areas of expertise was atheism. But he had a class. So one of my friends was telling me this. He had a class. So Virginia, we had a lot of shuyukh and a lot of scholars, not just like speakers. So there was a branch of Imam Muhammad bin Saud University in Riyadh. They had a branch in Virginia. And stationed at that branch, we had like top level mashayikh. Some of them are people like Sheikh Abdul Aziz al-Fawzan that if you go on YouTube and search something in Arabic, it'll be him explaining it like and others like who were heavy hitters in the Islamic finance, Sheikh Yusuf al-Shubayli and others. Anyways, there were a lot of amazing people there. There was also American Open University there that had Dr. Salah Sawi. Sheikh Salah was with us in Virginia for many years. So we had a lot of du'at and mashayikh and students of knowledge and speakers. And Sheikh Jaffer Idris used to have a class where he would sit on the chair and these big shuyukh would sit on the ground. Like, what is he going to explain to them? He would explain the complex philosophical writings of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when he gets deep into the philosophy, you get lost. So that was part of his expertise. So he would sit and explain that to the mashayikh. So this guy is telling me that, and he's knowledgeable, this man is knowledgeable. He said, I asked the Sheikh, I said, Sheikh, I want to attend that class. I want to see what the... He said, the Sheikh told me, feel free to come, but you can't ask any questions. And he tells me, he said, Wallahi, I sat in that class and I was like, what religion is this? He said, I had no clue what they were talking about. So that's also the depth of the level or the depth of knowledge that the Sheikh rahimahullah had. So we learned a lot from him. We like practically, I'm saying we, but I learned a lot from him. I practically lived in his house, and spent the night there, and I would consult him on anything, whether it's deen or dunya, and he had a very, very blessed opinion about things. Like everything he advised me on was correct, and it's a big loss for the ummah. You can still find some lectures of his. Huda TV has some golden recordings. It's him and Sheikh Yasir Fazaqa, golden. And there's some Peace TV lectures of his if you go on YouTube. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the good thing is that he wanted to be buried in Al-Madinah, and he was actually buried in Al-Baqi'. يعني هنيئا له. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him al-Firdaus al-A'la. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive his sins and accept all his good deeds and multiply his rewards and make his grave expansive and make it from the gardens of paradise, and grant his family patience. Jazakumullah khairan for coming tonight and for listening attentively. Sallallahu barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.